involves the concept of externality and internality are both myths.
That is okay, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I wouldn't be able to. Yeah, okay, perfect. Range, yeah, range is okay also.
Okay. So, a very good morning to everyone. I welcome every one of you to be here to be part of this session. I welcome our guest and the speaker of the session. Now let me introduce to you about the speaker and our guest. Our guest, Nivid Desai, is our former student, Xavier, and studied here for 5 years. He studied his BA in 2019, completed his BA in 2019, and MA in 2021. He is and was a junior of our college, our department, and also an unforgettable memory. So, Nivid currently serves, he works as a teaching associate at IIT Gandhinagar, where he takes lecture on writing and creative expressions for undergraduate and graduate students. As far as radio is concerned, in 2018, while he was studying here, right, SY, he worked at Radio Mirchi for 6 months as an intern, as a writing intern for their breakfast show. And the show name was Hi Ahmedabad, which was hosted by RJ Dhvanit. There his key responsibilities were writing and production for radio broadcast and marketing campaign, as well as handling event production for Mirchi's outdoor corporate publicity department. So that was all about Nivid Desai, one of my favorite students as well.
Thank you.
When I joined this college, it was my first class
Yes,
with the students, and one of them was Nivid Desai. So now I want Akko to offer a bouquet to our guests.
Thank you so much.
Our topic of this session today is script writing for radio and television anchoring. Now I invite our guest, Nivid Desai, to chair the session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. To quote Arnold Schwarzenegger from Terminator and Akshay Kumar from Rowdy Rathod, I'm back. Today I'm going to speak about my experience in terms of writing for media in general, with a slight special focus on radio and television. I worked, as sir mentioned, I worked as a writing intern at Radio Mirchi in 2018. I began my stint in January, ended in June. My show was called Hi Ahmedabad, and it was hosted by RJ Dhvanit. It ran from 7 in the morning to 11 in the morning for half of my stint, and then from 7 in the morning till 12 in the noon for the other half of my stint. I am going to share with you what my experience was, and then after that I've been informed that you guys have already collected a bunch of questions that you have about radio and broadcast. and I will try my best to respond to the queries that are suitable to my experience. I did not host a show, so I was not an RJ as such. I was too underqualified and too young, and my voice was too thin at that time to be an RJ. But I was trained as a broadcaster, but I went on air for a gross total of 1 time for 2 minutes, and I spoke a gross total of 5 words on air. So that is my broadcasting experience on air. But off the air, we did quite some work. So I'm going to share a couple of insights from that, and then I want a majority of this session to be your questions, right? So whatever curiosities you have, whatever questions you have, I would love to respond to them, and I would love to share my experience of what things go on apart from the RJ's voice that you listen to in your car or in your earphones or so on and so forth. So here's what a radio studio setup is like. There is a host, also known as a jock, also known as a radio jockey or an RJ. In most cases, the radio jockey is the senior most person within that setup, within the studio. Then there is a producer. The producer takes care of everything which is not the RJ's voice, right? Everything apart from the RJ's own presentation. The producer takes care of everything which is the background of stuff, right? Now, this term producer is very misunderstood because we understand the word producer in terms of Bollywood, right? Producer is the one who shells out money, right? Financer, we have a rather politically correct term for it as well, financer, right? But in terms of radio and television, both, a producer is someone who literally produces the show. Takes care of content, takes care of the execution of the show, what goes on air, what does not go on air, how is news supposed to be presented, what news is supposed to be presented, and in terms of TV anchoring, in terms of broadcast news, a producer is at times even more senior than the anchor, because the anchor is supposed to be the editor-in-chief, right? The one you see on the screen is supposed to be the editor or the host or the political commentator of that particular channel. But the person who is in the broadcast box is known as the executive producer, often among the highest paid officials in broadcast TV and the senior most official in broadcast TV. This person has at least 30 years of experience because they have to take care of everything that goes on air, everything that you see on your screen. Now, you might disagree with what goes on the screen, about the quality, about the standards, or how it is executed, or why is it even executed at all, right? Most news, we have that question these days. But the executive producer in ideal circumstances is the one that takes care of everything that goes on air. And do you see that little earpiece that the anchor has? So at times, it is considered almost a sin for the anchor to remove that earpiece, because that earpiece is the producer talking to the anchor directly. So there's a talkback button in the producer's chamber, right? The producer's chamber has a team of people, writers, graphic designers, broadcasting specialists, channel officials, all of them sit in that producer's chamber while the show goes on. If you have seen shows like The Newsroom, The Morning Show, all of these shows clearly and accurately depict what a TV broadcast environment is like. In terms of radio, that is not quite the case because of two reasons. Number one, एक तो जगह कम है, right? Radio stations are relatively small spaces to work in. A TV studio would be immensely large because a TV studio has to accommodate a newsroom, an entire floor of journalists, an entire floor of writers, producers, and beat journalists, senior editors, and people of all grades, of all levels of seniority, working in tandem to produce news, which eventually goes on air through the voice of one person, right? Be it Faye D'Souza, be it Navika, be it Rahul Shivshankar, be it Tucker Carlson, Nancy Grace, all of these people, they speak the news which has been processed throughout the day by at least a couple of hundred people. Because somebody gets information, somebody writes the information, somebody edits the information, the executive producer takes a stance on how this information is supposed to be depicted on screen. And then the anchor reads from the teleprompter, right? The copy is written by somebody else, it is approved by somebody else, edited by somebody else, and the executive producer is the one who is the most responsible for whatever goes on air. The anchor and the executive producer, two people. In terms of radio, that is not quite the case, because the producer works very closely with the host within the same studio. So later in the day, I will give you the picture of my studio where I worked in Mirchi. So the host is there, the RJ. There's a mic, there's a mixer, a whole, have you seen a DJ console? It's not quite as advanced as a DJ console, but you can actually conduct and manage tracks. So at times you might hear there's a background music going on while the RJ is speaking. They are called underlays, right? Underlays are produced in-house. They are produced by music producers who work for the radio station, right? That's why every single radio station has different underlays. And nobody, like if Karnil owns a radio station, I cannot use his underlays, because then I'll be in jail or paying crores of rupees. So that I'll come to in a bit. There's a lot of money involved. So that is also something that I'll come to in a bit. So that console has several different tracks that one can manage, the host can manage. There is also a master key that if once it slides up, you see a glaring red sign on in front of your studio that says on air, and those two are the gospel words of radio, right? If you are on air, it is the most serious time within a studio that there can be. I was talking to Hardik sir just yesterday that when I was an intern, I was 18 years old. I had the most juvenile sense of humor you could imagine, right? And if the jock cracked a joke, I would not stop laughing. Would not. Impossible. So there have been cases where I have had to sit, because my seat was right next to the mic. If Dhvanit is conducting the show right here, I am sitting exactly where Karnil is sitting. And if I laugh, at least 1 lakh people will change the radio station to something else, right? So I did not want that happening, of course, because I didn't want to lose my job. So there were days when I was sitting like this, because you cannot make a sound. And there were also days when I was producing news on the side for a segment which was coming half an hour later, because you need to process your news, you need to come up with copy, right? You need to write what the take is and what the angle is and so on and so forth. In that case, when I was flipping the pages of a newspaper, there have been instances where suddenly the countdown said 20 seconds to air, and the jock is preparing, everything, all the knobs are in place. It's 15 seconds to air. I have still not stopped writing. 10 seconds to air. The jock and the producer both glare at me like I'm the most vicious criminal in the world. And I have had to stop mid-flip of the page. Statue ho gaya tha main for 3 minutes while the jock was on air. Because even if I lay the page down, that sound was going to be recorded on the mic. Because that mic is the most sensitive piece of audio equipment that is ever present in a radio station. So that is just a view of how things work. So there's the jock, there's the producer, there are a couple of interns, couple of trainees, and all of that depends on what the scale of the show is, right? How important is the timing of the show? So again, I was talking to Hardik sir yesterday about how TV broadcast works differently. TV broadcast works differently than radio broadcast. Because, at least in India, we have a very unique pattern of when do we consume media? During the time of the day. Just by general knowledge, or by your own experience, when do you most consume radio?
In the morning.
Commutes, right? When you are in the car, or when you are walking, or when you are in the kitchen, right? When you're cooking something, you need background noise. So my show was the morning show, right? 7 to 11. Peak hours in traffic, peak hours in engagement. At any given moment, the metrics showed that our show was listened to by 6 to 7 million people at any given moment, because people are traveling back and forth, they are going to the office. Traffic jams are a blessing for radio people because more the engagement and so on and so forth. People are calling in because they are stuck in the traffic and things like that. So that is peak engagement hour in the morning. That is considered prime time. Have you heard this word?
Yes.
Prime time. Prime time is, it literally translates to peak engagement, which means more brands will give you ads, which means there will be sponsors for your show, right? It will be something presents. Hi Ahmedabad with RJ Dhvanit. Powered by something, sponsored by something. 3 different brands are supporting one show. Why? Engagement. Prime time. And that also translates into how long the show is. As I said, when I began, Hi Ahmedabad was 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., 4 hours, which is, at that time, it was considered the most time period that a jock could go on air, right? And then it got extended to 5 hours, because 5 hours of programming is a huge task. Content kahan se laoge? Roz, every day, you have to go live for 5 hours in the morning. When the news is just coming in, there is not even any event that you can discuss and gossip about, right? कि दिन में कुछ हो गया है and you are reacting to it. No, the news is just coming in for the day, and you have to host a show for 5 hours. That is prime time. Then comes the next show, the slot of the next show, and I'm speaking about Mirchi specifically, right? The next show was 12 to 2, literally got cut down to half, only 2 hours. Why? Low engagement. People have reached the office, people have reached their colleges, no engagement.
So
Lunch hours. People talk to each other. People are not alone. They do not need company in terms of sounds. They already have natural company, right? So 12 to 2, low engagement. Also, the junior RJs who have just recently joined are almost always given these low engagement shows, which also means that they do not have a producer. Junior RJs have to do all the work alone. At most, they will be given one intern to work with. Because the intern needs training as well, the RJ needs training as well. The stakes are low, right? The consequences aren't that high as a prime time show, right? Then comes 2 to 5, right? 2 to 5 is a moderate 3-hour show, mostly because the homemakers who they are free from their chores for the morning, lunch is done. If somebody wants to hang out in the afternoon, they are listening to radio. Colleges are done, right? If students are going back home, they are listening to radio. So in these cases, engagement is slightly moderate. So the mid-senior level RJs are given the 2 to 5 slot. But again, it's only 3 hours. It's also 1 hour less than the prime time, or even 2 hours less than the prime time. Then comes the second prime time of the day. 5 to 9. 4 hours again. Why? Peak hours again. Traffic. People are going back home. People want to listen to something. People want to relax. They are stuck up with their jobs. They are frustrated. They want to listen to Bollywood gossip. They want to listen to इसने क्या किया, उसने क्या किया, इसने क्या बोला आज, किसका बच्चा कैसा दिखता है, I don't know. So all of these things are content. Most of radio revolves around Bollywood. It's a sad state of affairs, but that is how it is. If you have noticed, in the recent past, a lot of broadcasters have left radio. That is precisely because of that. They were very senior people who began the radio with a very pure version of the medium, And then slowly and steadily commercialization, Bollywood, all of that took over. And that has geared the radio in a different direction that is not that well suited with the previous generation of broadcasters. That's why a new age of young broadcasters are coming in now. So in terms of broadcast, this is the ins and outs of it. And then so at 9 p.m. the jock hands over the show to something called a night jock, right? Love Guru, Roshi, in our radio station it was Roshi. And night shows are mostly not domestic. They are national broadcasts. Means there is one RJ in Mumbai who is conducting the show, and all around the country it is broadcasted. So even the weekend shows, if you hear Mirchi Top 20, right, these countdown shows, they are not local shows. Nobody is here in Mirchi Ahmedabad, here in Mirchi Ahmedabad conducting the show. There is no live RJ, nothing. It is in most cases pre-recorded, not even live, or it is live but not here. Right? So Roshi conducts the show from Mumbai, right? Nivid conducts the show from Delhi. So all of these cities have these big names in terms of broadcasting seniority, popularity. They are celebrities in their own respect, and they conduct nationwide shows. And that's how the whole day unfurls in terms of radio broadcasting. There are 2 prime time slots and 3 general mild to moderate engagement slots in which different levels of seniority are observed in terms of who hosts the show, whether the show has a producer, whether the show has a team, whether the show has writer or writers working for it. I happened to be a writing intern, so I was there to train myself in radio broadcasting. Doing that was a very different experience than what I would have expected, because of course I grew up with the radio in the background, so it was almost the soundtrack of my life, right? My parents are huge admirers of the medium. My grandparents were also huge admirers of the medium, so I always had some or the other radio station going on in the background at home. So I knew the grammar of the medium, right? Each medium of communication, each medium of broadcast has its own grammar. TV has its own grammar. For example, if you are conducting a debate on live TV, that means you have to be an expert time manager. Everybody should get, ideally, everybody should get equal times to speak, right? If you are a comedian on TV, if you have a late night talk show, then come in. If you have a late night talk show, then you have to open with a monologue, have an interview segment, have a games segment, and then close with a monologue, right? That's a grammar. Just like that, radio also has a grammar. With that, each show within radio has a grammar. So a morning broadcast show where people are just waking up, you are charging them up for the day, you are motivating them, you're uplifting them. It also reflects in the kind of music that you will hear, right? Retro songs will not be played in the morning, why, right? You would only hear the upbeat, high tempo, pop Bollywood songs in the morning. That is managed by somebody else. That's a music producer working in-house who manages the cue of the music, right? But the content of the show is almost always defined by what time the show is in. So, if I talk about my own show, right? 7 a.m. the show opens. The first link is something called Morning Mantra, right? Morning Mantra used to be our show's staple brand in a way. Morning Mantra was exclusively written by Dhvanit himself. He did not let anybody touch the script. Okay? He wanted that to be his own medium of expression. So we were even told to come after 7:45. Once Morning Mantra has been broadcasted, recorded, went on air, produced, everything after that, I was told to come to the office at 7:45. After 2 links are done. So that he has his own space to himself. In the morning, he is retired now, but he opened with content which was his own. Moving forward, there was There were a couple of calls to people, happy birthday wishes. Following that, there was the headlines, news headlines. So in news headlines, here's what happened. There were at least a dozen newspapers coming into Radio Mirchi every day. At least a dozen from all around the country. We didn't have international news because we didn't need to cover it for Ahmedabad. But there were at least a dozen newspapers coming in from all around the country, of all languages. So we had at least 15 to 20 minutes to scout the news for the day, the headlines for the day, right? That work was done by the producer and by me, the writing intern. So I would write the script for what the news was and where the report was coming from. Now this is very funny because almost every radio station that you know of is owned by a publication house. General knowledge question, Radio Mirchi is owned by Times of India, right? My FM is owned by Divya Bhaskar, Dainik Bhaskar, the Dainik Bhaskar group. Radio City, as far as I know, is owned by the Dainik Jagran group, right? So all of these newspaper publications, major media publication, own these brands. Therefore, if a jock is going on air, that person cannot speak the name of any other newspaper except for the newspaper that owns the radio station. So when we are going on air at Mirchi, when we are going on air in Mirchi, we can say the names Times of India, Nav Gujarat Samay, Femina, The Economic Times, and so on and so forth, all the subsidiaries of the Times Group, of Bennett Coleman, right? So we can say that the headline in Times of India says so and so. A report from Times of India says so and so. But we cannot say a report from Gujarat Samachar says so and so. Because otherwise there will be a libel case. And we'll have to pay crores and crores of rupees. Because A, that's not our intellectual property. And B, we are encroaching on somebody else's creative property and passing them on our own medium, earning money from it. Big no-no, red flag. Right? The jock loses his job, the producer loses his job. It's all bloodbath. So that's where the branding comes in. Each radio station has a parent company. That's a media company, right? Big FM is owned by the Reliance Group, for example. So the Reliance Group has a media subsidiary. Bennett Coleman also has a media subsidiary that owns Mirchi. My FM is owned by the Divya Bhaskar Group. So Divya Bhaskar has a media subsidiary which owns My FM. Which means that if that media conglomerate is large enough, they can control a lot of operations in media. So Bennett Coleman also owns something called Jungli Pictures. Jungli Pictures is a movie production company, right? So if you, that is owned by Vineet Jain. Vineet Jain is the chairman of Bennett Coleman. Vineet Jain is also the executive director, like MD of Bennett Coleman. So he owns everything in terms of, probably the largest media empire in the country, among the largest in the world. So almost everything that you see around is owned by Bennett Coleman. They also have a whole university called Bennett University that trains people in media. Times now is Bennett Coleman. So where was I? Yeah, Jungli Pictures. If somebody produces a movie under the banner of Jungli Pictures, Radio Mirchi is automatically the radio partner of that movie. Which means Razi, the movie, Alia Bhatt, Vicky Kaushal, Razi, the movie was produced by Jungli Pictures. So, Mudke Na Dekho Dilbaro was premiered on Radio Mirchi. Do you see how this works? And then, for all the outdoor publicities and the indoor publicities, Radio Mirchi jocks were given the first priority to interview both Alia Bhatt and Vicky Kaushal. Of course, they are free to go ahead and give interviews to everybody else, but exclusive premieres are with these people. And every single radio brand in this way partners with several music production companies, several film production companies to have exclusive rights of first streaming. Right? पहले होता है ना, exclusively available on this. Spotify पे पहले आएगा, फिर बाकी सारी podcast applications पे आएगा. That's because it's a Spotify exclusive. So exclusion means this. We have the exclusive rights of streaming your songs the first time. The song Ud Gaye by Ritviz was premiered on Mirchi for the first time because they acquired the rights to that song. It was under AIB, right? Bacardi House Party. So they acquired the rights for radio streaming, and then we proudly announced that Suniye Mirchi pe pehli baar internet sensation Ritviz ka naya gana Ud Gaye, and then you would see Ud Gaye, you would hear Ud Gaye on air. So rights acquisitions and partnerships also play a huge role in what goes on air. Right? There are some times when the jock has to incorporate some production angle that directly serves the sponsor or directly serves the parent company. उसमें राइटर कुछ नहीं कर सकता, उसमें प्रोड्यूसर कुछ नहीं कर सकता क्योंकि पैसा वहां से आ रहा है. The money is flowing in from a different stream. Therefore, the person who is giving the money, the patron, has to be given importance. Right? They have to be given priority. Because otherwise, घर कैसे चलेगा? So, that's how writing works, that's how production works, partnerships in media work. A lot goes behind the doors, a lot goes behind the curtains. In most people's cases, you are all students of radio, so you know better, but in most people's cases, people think that a radio jockey is a lone warrior, right? And the funny thing is, everybody thinks they can be a radio jockey. Everybody. बातच तो करवानी है, बातें ही तो करनी है. किसको नहीं आता? मैं मुझे बिठा दो माइक पे. I will conduct show for 5 hours. No. There's a lot of money running on you. I was so intimidated that the writing that I produced at the drop of a hat had 60 lakh people listening at any given moment, live. And then the show would go on to Mehsana, to Bhavnagar, to Junagadh, and then the show would go abroad, to US, to UAE. So these are the subsidiaries which came in to Mirchi when I was an intern. So we would record some links for the US and then send it over to Mirchi in the US. So Colorado, Bay Area in California, Chicago, New Jersey, the centers where Gujaratis were at the in highest population, we broadcasted our shows there. And of course, because they have migrated from here to there, right? So they know what RJs speak on radio. They know what kind of importance they have in the cultural phenomenon. The golden radio, the first golden age of radio is over, but I am super optimistic that the second golden age is just about to set in. Because we have a fresh bunch of broadcasters who have come in. One of my friends, Yashvi, is the morning jock right now after Dhvanit retired. So she handles Hi Ahmedabad right now as the jock. And she is among my favorite broadcasters right now because she has a sense of responsibility. She has a sense of artistic intelligence, of media intelligence, of how to conduct a show. The most important thing that one must remember while writing scripts is that you are not writing for yourself. Each and every writer that I have met in my lifetime has this misplaced sense of notion कि मैं लिख रहा हूँ. I am writing, therefore I have to have my own voice. I have to have my own thoughts. Granted, you have your own voice, you have your own thoughts, but please realize that they serve a larger purpose. They are a piece within the grander scheme of things. It has an audience of 6 million people. You cannot be whimsical while writing for media because you have responsibility. You have to appeal to the audience that your show has. You have to appeal to the personality that your RJ has to produce on air, right? You have to appeal to the personality that your anchor, the TV anchor, has to produce. So if you are a writer for TV, then you would have to align your style with the anchor's style. If you're a writer for radio, you would have to align your style with the jock's style. And that's how synergy works. That's how the partnership between anchors and producers go on for decades and decades because they are so much in tune that the producer knows exactly how the anchor should be portrayed, how the radio jock should be portrayed. right? The producer that I was working with in Hi Ahmedabad was with Dhvanit for 15 years. That's because they worked so well in tune. The producer understood exactly what the show was and what the show was not, right? There would never for 1 second of being on air, there would never be Bollywood gossip on Hi Ahmedabad. Absolutely impossible. Even if we covered news, we covered it with a sense of sensitivity, right? So as writers, we were trained to have something called an angle, something known as a take. So if I'm covering news for radio, I cannot just state what the headline is. I have to have an angle. I have to have a take. What does that mean? I'll give you an example. There was, around the time that I was an intern, or maybe before or after, slightly before or after that, there was news that Ranbir Kapoor and Katrina Kaif were photographed in a beach in Ibiza in their swimsuits. And they had not declared their relationship officially. And some paparazzi had clicked pictures, leaked it online, sold it to these publication houses, newspapers, made lakhs of rupees. And then Ranbir and Katrina both were super mad. That these are our private moments, how dare you photograph them, right? Now, in my mind, there can be two ways of covering this event. Number one, you either gossip about, wow, pakad liya, red-handed. Ranbir and Katrina, this is sensationalism, right? This is spice. This is hot. Which ironically happens to be the tagline of my radio station. Radio Mirchi, it's hot, right? So Ranbir and Katrina caught in Ibiza, vacationing at the seashore on the beach in their swimsuits. And that is sensationalism. You can produce it as a sensational piece, as a gossip piece. On the other hand, what does a sensible broadcast comprise? You talk about ethics in being a paparazzi. You talk about having the dignity of respecting the celebrity's private space, right? That of course they are public personalities, but that does not mean that every angle of their life is available for public consumption. That's a sensible take. That's a responsible take. The news item remains the same, the perspective changes, right? Depends on what the tone of the show is, depends on what direction the show wants to take. You decide how you want to cover news. It just cannot be pure headlines. There is a segment that is only for headlines that happens once or twice in the span of 5 hours of you being on air. But apart from that, when you have to do 2 or 3 minutes of links, they are called links, right? Jock talk is called links. So whenever you have to do 2 or 3 minutes of links, you have to have a take. And this does not only consist of Bollywood incidents, this consists of politics, right? If you have to be sarcastic, how sarcastic do you have to be? If you have to crack a pun, is the pun politically correct? I was there within the studio when the Karnataka elections were happening in 2018, right? And the government was overthrown and the governor was in a huge dilemma about proving majority, and it was a huge bloodbath in Karnataka elections. I remember we overran the show. This was when Hi Ahmedabad was 7 to 11. We overran the show for 30 minutes till 11:30, because if it is a political news piece, a junior RJ cannot be given the show until the political news cycle is over. The first round of counting the votes is over. So Dhvanit, being the senior RJ, stuck around, covered the show until the first round of counting the votes was over. We cracked jokes, of course. It was not a serious political. We are not a political show. We are not political analysts. We are entertainers. We are broadcasters, right? So we, of course, cracked jokes. We, of course, cracked sarcastic political references. But we gave it along with pieces of information within context that made sense to the audience. That made the audience understand what the actual election coverage scenario was. We weren't Kunal Kamra on air, right? Because, and that's a different set of audience. If you have a comedy show, by all means go ahead and make fun of people. By all means go ahead and crack jokes. But that was not the show that I was a part of. I was a part of a broadcast show that had a serious angle of journalism to it as well. It had an angle of having takes, having opinions, and being a sensible broadcaster at large. So that's how scripts are made. Sometimes at the drop of a hat. Because you don't know, news is just coming in, somebody call you saying, "Idhar ye ho gaya hai," there's an accident, there's a traffic jam. How do you have to present it within 2 minutes? Because there were times when I was asked to write a script while there were a maximum of 3 minutes to go to be on air. And within that span, 5 people had to come together, decide what the take was, decide what the information was, synthesize the whole thing, write the whole script, hand it over to the RJ to be spoken. And this all happens in a war room kind of situation where you don't know what the next minute is going to bring in. So it's exciting. If you are in the studio, you are completely cut off from the world, but at the same time, you are the most connected to the world, as connected as you can be, right? And it is super thrilling, but you also have to have a deep sense of responsibility. Because again, you are not writing for yourself. Be it in radio or in TV, you are writing for an audience. And you are not the sole representative of that written piece of information. There are people senior to you, there are people junior to you, who are all part of this one show, headed by the anchor, headed by the jock, who delivers information, who delivers content. The content only happens to be produced by you, right? You don't have to hog the limelight at all times, if I may say so, right? So that's about it. A couple of remarks of what my experience of radio was like. Now, do you mind if I go over the questions that you guys listed down? Or do you have any fresh questions right now? Yes?
As you said, it was 7:45 to begin with 12, and then this was your second year when college is going offline. Then how were you
Attending classes.
and managing?
No, I only, did I not mention that? I only was in studio for 1 month for the summer vacation. Otherwise, I used to write the show the night before, come to college, and I used to write the show in the middle of the lecture sometimes as well, between the gaps, because I would listen to a link which was going on, because I had the schedule with me, right? At what time does what link come? If I have a link coming up at 9:40, then that's mighty comfortable for me. I have a 5-minute break between 9:40 and 9:45. I listen to that link. I kind of have an estimation of what direction the show will go in. I write a couple of notes, send it to the producer. It goes on air in a couple of minutes. So at times this also had to happen. I remember one distinct memory. I was commuting in bus, right? I live in Gandhinagar, so I commute. I used to commute every day. So I was in the bus, I was listening to the show, and there was, at that time, because of some threat of a disease, like an infectious disease, bless you, for the threat of an infectious disease or something, Pani Puri was banned in Ahmedabad. Remember?
Yeah.
There used to be this one brief period when Pani Puri was banned in Ahmedabad for a couple of days, and everybody lost their crap. Rightfully so, might I add. So Pani Puri was banned in Ahmedabad, and we were amused, right? This is such an interesting piece of information to cover on broadcast radio. So sadly, I could not be in the studio because college. So I was in the bus, I was listening to the show, and I suddenly had a joke. And that was the day when the ban was lifted. And meanwhile, there were conversations going around for banning PUBG. It was amazing stuff. So there was something which was, a ban was being lifted here, and another discussion was happening about a ban being put in somewhere else, right? So I made a joke. I thought of a joke. I was like, oh, this is a good punchline. Let's pick this up. So I wrote to my producer. I was on WhatsApp back then. So I wrote to my producer on WhatsApp. Here's a joke that I think might be interesting to include on air. And this was not proofread, okay? There is no editorial history of this. This has not been filtered through layers and layers of thoughts about where ye include karna chahiye, nahi karna chahiye. This was just a moment of, okay, this sounds funny, let's go on air, right? So I wrote PUBG, right? And if you're Gujaratis, you will understand this joke. PUBG, PUBG equals Pani Puri upar thi ban gayo. I wrote this to my producer. I was listening to the show. 2 minutes after that, went on air. So it also happens in a split second like this. It just happens to be the case that my friends do not like when I crack these jokes, but the audience likes it. So I don't know where to have my priorities settled or unsettled, I guess. So it also happens in a split second like this. But in the links which were planned, like observational humor or observational comments about social issues and things like that, or there is an ongoing discussion at a national level about something, politics, or again social issues, or even about cultural issues, or if there is an exam season going on, and I want to comment about something about how we are making exams toxic, how we are putting too much pressure on the students, I write a link the night before and I send it to my producer and the jock, and then I come to college the next morning. And then at times I get to listen to okay, no problem. At times I get to listen to the show and I see how they made the editorial changes. They cut down some extra words that I had written because of length and time limit. And they cut it down, they made it more polished, and then they went on air with that script, right? And that was written the night before. Right. So there used to be a war room like situation in my house as well. I used to sit my parents and my grandparents around and we used to discuss what the next day's show was going to be. And then we would write scripts together and I will send it over to my producer and my jock. So it was quite fun. I mean, I had the most thrilling time of my life in broadcast. But and I also had an offer from Radio Mirchi after I graduated to join as a station producer, but I wanted to study more. Sounds like the nerdiest decision I made, but I was not prepared to step into entertainment, step into broadcast that well back then. So I joined the master's course here. Otherwise, I would have, that's also a career trajectory that I had been offered because Mirchi Love was expanding back then. So RJ Ekta, if you have heard, so she's the morning jock in Mirchi Love. Simultaneously, while we were producing our show, Ekta was producing her show, right? So I was asked to join as a station producer for Ekta, but I had other priorities, so I shifted to academics, and here I am. But that is also a career trajectory that I could have taken back then, thanks to the 6 months of internship that I did and the kind of experience that I gathered over time. Right, being engaged with Mirchi. I am still engaged with Mirchi in some capacities. There are discussions going on for original podcasts that Mirchi is producing, and they need script writers for that. So I signed up. I gave up a couple of demos in terms of scripts, and then they've liked it, and maybe, God willing, that might also turn into something. So they are expanding as well, which is very interesting. That we have kind of closeted the concept of radio into just broadcast and live radio. But radio in its definition is in itself expanding. People are trying out podcasts, people are trying out web content, right, social media content. And that's how all jocks also evolve. That's how broadcasters also evolve. So that's about it. Yes, Bhakti, you had a question.
Yes, you talked about how if your radio station is owned by one particular group of newspapers, you will have to quote them. Like you will have to take their names.
Yes.
When you are telling the news. What do you do when you are actually taking news from some other source?
Newspapers mein likha hai. Just simple like today's newspaper headlines are so and so. You're not banned from using anybody else's sources, right? You can use, because they are newspapers. They have printed their own news. You just can't take their name. It is also not that you must take Times of India's name. It's only that you are only permitted to take Times of India's name. It's not like in every broadcast you have to take Times of India's name once. Because people know that Mirchi is owned by Times of India. You don't need to Dil karta hai TV tower pe main chad jaऊं, chilla chilla ke main, no, not needed. But you are only permitted to take the name of Times of India if you are a Mirchi employee or a Mirchi jock. Again, same way, you are only supposed to take the name of Divya Bhaskar if you are a My FM jock. You can use news from all around the world, but you are only permitted to take the name and quote the source of that one particular newspaper that owns you.
And then you talk about getting news immediately, you know. So, if you have to broadcast that news in 50 minutes, what is the status of fact checking?
We cross-check between two sources at least. So there is the first level of, it's called first confirmed and second confirmed, right? So if at least two sources are talking about it, then it means that, and of course, two sources need to be original sources. It should not be like CNN is bouncing off of a CNBC report and saying that CNBC reported that so and so has happened, therefore we are reporting as well. No, CNN needs to have its own report for two different sources to confirm that such an event has happened. So fact checking in both in broadcast TV and in broadcast radio, fact checking is always double filtered.
In such a short period of time you can fact check?
We do not go on air until it is fact checked that it is in two sources. Yes? True, I agree. So in some cases I went to the studio, and what the jock would do is he would have a highlighter, right? And he would only highlight the pieces of lines that he wants to cover. And also he would not be reading out from the script. He would have a fair idea of what this point is supposed to say, and then he would mold it to his style, right? Because of course I tried my best to write in conversational language, but then you cannot truly write in a conversational language, right? Because there's a sense of diction, rise and fall, all of that. You are function students, you would understand this, right? Diction, accent, rise and fall, rhythm, all of that, pitch. So that cannot be conveyed in a radio script as such. That is the jock's final call. So the jock kind of modulates the entire script depending on how much time they have, depending on what take they want to take, depending on what tone they want to set, so on and so forth. So drafts happen, but they happen very immediately, right? So the editorial decision lies in the heads of these senior people, producer, jocks, and those people. So I am not asked to revise my drafts. They do the work of editing on their part. That's usually how it has functioned with me. Yes, anybody else? Yes?
So you said that you have like the WhatsApp thing that you texted your producer
Yeah.
and that went on air. So, but then how did you just confirm the whole thing and you brought it on air?
Confirm, sorry, what?
You said that you confirm and told us, right? So that time how did you confirm it?
No, so this was a joke. PUBG was a joke. The punchline that I said, I only put the punchline. I didn't write the whole news report. And of course I have news reports on my phone, right? So I back then, while I was working as a writer for radio, I had Google alerts for everything that was happening, the things that we were supposed to cover. So if a news piece was coming in, I would see what the news is, what the source was, where it was coming from, who had reported it, and then if it was double confirmed, we would go on air, like that. Yes.
There's a very general question.
Yeah.
How do radios balance politically, like about politics? See, like being in this platform, you have to have this balance of politics. You can't be on one side that yes, this party does.
Of course.
How is this balance be done by the editorials? Because see, the news comes, even the newspapers are, their shares are bought by the party.
True.
Sometimes even the newspaper, while reading it, we see that yes, this is a bit of this is leftover. This is not so real.
True.
So how do that thing gets covered up in radio?
So if you notice, there is very little political coverage on radio. People don't turn on radio to listen to political news, right? People turn on radio to be entertained. But when it comes to the journalistic part of radio, it's very rare that like a jock would take a stance, a political stance. They just report what is happening. And they report based on, they also, if there is contrasting opinions between two newspapers or two publications, they report based on both of them. They say that a certain publication has said so and so, and a certain publication has said so and so. Because the main job of radio is to entertain. If they get in political trouble, then a lot of money would be lost, right? So it is almost always advised to stay away from politics in a way for jocks and producers. But whenever they have to report political news, even if they are taking a stance, they're taking a nuanced stance, right? There is no opinionated this side, that side sort of a stance. They produce a report based on yes, power balance between both these things and facts, of course. Yes? I'm coming to that. Oh, I knew Dhvanit beforehand. We had worked together have you heard of the Ahmedabad International Literature Festival, which happens here? So I happen to be one of the core committee members of the Literature Festival. So I joined it in 2016 when I was in my first year. And I hosted one of Dhvanit's sessions with Madhur Bhandarkar, the director. And that's how I got to know him. And then we kept in touch. And then when Morning Mantra released, I went to meet him. And then he was like, come work for me. I'm like, okay. But then I will give you the official route of going through this. There are careers pages of every single radio station. There are internship opportunities available there always. Otherwise, go through LinkedIn. Check out who is working in producer duties or programming duties at these radio stations. Reach out to them, ask them for internship opportunities. Do not ever trouble jocks because they don't respond to DMs that frequently. Because they are entertainers, right? They don't have that much leverage over these hiring positions. So always go through these programming officials or producing officials. They'll be able to guide you about how to apply for an internship, what can be the result of an internship eventually. Most radio internships are unpaid. So that's something that you will have to deal with. Right? Yes?
So when we talk about radio, TV anchoring, so whenever in space, so what are the differential points we keep in mind while writing or
be as short as possible because time is of the essence. You will have to develop a sense of brevity, right? That you will have to make sure that not a single word is wasted. Radio is a medium of listening more than it is a medium of speaking, right? So that's why you have to make sure that your listener, they have invested their time in you. So you have to be very just to their time, both in terms of TV and radio. So make sure that your script is not heavy with information which is unnecessary. Right? Only carry the things which carry meaning. Each sentence should cause the next sentence. There should be a logical flow of rhythm between point A, point B, point C, point D, so on and so forth. And this will come with practice. Ideally, practice on air. But if you have to apply for internships and so on and so forth, maybe listen to radio as much as possible, watch TV programs as much as possible, and then try to replicate their styles in your scripts. Try both for TV and radio, because they will, as I said, they will have different grammars, right? They will have different rhythms. So it will take time for you to consume it and then synthesize it and then sort of mold it into your own style. But you will find your style eventually, and that is what is going to make you special. That is what is going to make you stand out in terms of broadcasting media. It will take time, but you will get there, and it's going to be very fun to discover that entire process. Sir, do we have time? Are we wrapping up? Oh, they have lectures. Okay. I'm really sorry, but if you want to reach out to me at any moment to just ask anything, any curiosities that you might have, or just strike up a conversation. Yes? Sure. The Murga thing. No, that's a funny segment. So that's not pure piece of journalism, right? That's just for entertainment.
Sometimes there are speakers that are actually really qualified but not qualified.
Yes.
Like one time I was studying like second class and it was like why did they censor all of this words? So I was like not words. So they were like why did you speak them and why did you broadcast them?
So that's a good question. That's an ethical gray area that radio broadcast functions in, because they have to cater to all kinds of audiences, right? Mass media, I am sort of a critic of mass media precisely because of this, because it has very little conscience of its own, because it cannot afford to have a conscience, right? Because it has to cater to all kinds of people. That's why Mirchi Murga will only come in the later part of the day, where only adults are listening to it in a way, right? Because they are driving back home and things like that. That's where the majority of the audience comes in, and that's also where, if you maybe sadly enough, that is also where the majority of attention comes in, right? Because if you are edgy, how edgy are you trying to be, right? Because if you just go vanilla, you will not have any traction. So you have to be edgy. So censoring in a way is, whoever understands, whoever doesn't understand in a way. And no calls are live. All calls are recorded. So if they have censored some words and cut down on the content, that has gone through several production decisions, editorial production decisions, and then it has gone on air. Because Mirchi Murga doesn't only play in Ahmedabad, it plays all across Gujarat. It also goes on social media, right? It's an intellectual property of Radio Mirchi in a way. So there is an editorial decision that has taken place in order for it to go on air, because there's a certain section of the audience which likes it, which likes edgy humor. That's why you would have to cater to them. You would also have this, you would also have that. The audience decides which way to gravitate in a way.
Like there are shows wherein there is like one main topic around which the entire show is based on, right? So who decides that main topic? Does the writer decide or the artist?
No, the producer and the RJ, both of them. Yeah. These guys have to leave. Yeah. We're just wrapping it up. Yeah. Oh, man. Really sorry this overshot in time, but I'm hanging around for like 30 minutes if you guys want to. Yeah.
Quite interesting, enlightening, awareness spreader, and knowledge booster session it was. Now I call Ollie to deliver vote of thanks speech.
So, respected Professor Hardik and respected Mr. Nivid Desai and my fellow students, it is indeed my privilege to express vote of thanks on this occasion. And in this post-COVID times, I think it is really an opportunity for us as a student to interact with experts, subject experts in person rather than an online medium. And that's, I would like to thank St. Xavier's College and the management for organizing such events for our benefits. I would like to thank Professor Hardik for organizing this special program, and also for Mr. Nivid Desai for sparing his valuable time and sharing his insights with us. And last but not the least, my fellow students, that thank you for being here and attending the session and listening to the guest faculty patiently. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're also in the process of, Hardik sir and I are also in the process of organizing. Is there supposed to be a surprise, sir? Or oh, okay. Oh, okay. We're also in the process of organizing a studio visit for all of you. So we're also. Hardik sir.
If our AR is not functional, can you tag along?
I'm sorry?
How do we contact you if we have certain doubts?
Oh yeah, you can write my email ID. You can reach out to me on any social media. Nivid Desai 23. Nivid Desai 2323 @gmail.com.